to the Say What podcast. Here we are.
I said there they are.
Yeah, here we are.
There you are.
Mm-hmm. Watching wherever you are.
What's up?
This is the Say What podcast.
It is the Say What podcast, and this is the makeup podcast that we had promised last week.
Yeah, we didn't get to it.
No, we did not, because our film crew was gone.
Yeah.
And
our man was out.
Film crew was out. You know, that's a huge organization and wing of the church in and of itself. But here we are today.
Mm-hmm. So, it actually works out too, because your sermon this week was really good.
Yeah.
But you're going to continue it on Sunday, right?
Well, what we had planned on doing was for me to do the podcast this week over what we talked about Sunday, which was burnt bridges and mending burned bridges. And so I talked about three personalities, but like I always do, I spent more time setting the sermon up and then kind of whipping it in the driveway at the end. And I only got through one personality and talked about shimmies. But then there's Mephibosheth, and we talk about people that in your life, it's a burned bridge because they weren't there for you when you needed them. Mm-hmm. And so remember, what I said Sunday was I'm talking from the standpoint of David, who people did stuff to him. It was a burned bridge. Some of it was not his choosing. And so I'm talking from that perspective. However, there are people on the other side. You're the one that burnt the bridge. I didn't talk about them, but you can fill in the blanks. But we talked about Shimmy, and so getting a Mephibosheth, that's hard to say.
It's not as fun as Shimmy.
No, it's just harder to say. Like what's your name, Mephibosheth? Yeah. Like, are you sure? It's like, yeah, Mephibosheth. It's like, pronounce the P. It's a PH sound. Mephibosheth. So, what is wrong with that?
I don't know.
Say what?
You're not even supposed to say this.
Say what?
Say what?
Anyways,
this Sunday. Don't worry about that. This Sunday's sermon was really good.
As you knew what my sermon was. You've read my sermon.
I have.
We've talked through my sermon, and you said, don't go to podcast for that. It's too good. Do it on Sunday for church.
Yes, I really liked it. And you needed that time to set up the story, because it's a really cool story. If you were here on Sunday, if you weren't, check it out on our videos. It's a really cool story in the Bible. People that had wronged David, and now David's coming back and trying to mend those relationships. And the whole thing is good, and I'm excited.
Most of us, when relationships are broken, they're broken for a lifetime. And it doesn't have to be that way. Whether it's a relationship, an opportunity, a difficult situation, there is mending, and God can mend it, but there's different people in there. You got the shimmies who are antagonizers, then you got the Mephibosheths, which is what I was talking about to begin with, who went absent on you. They weren't there. You had poured a lot of time and energy in them, and you thought you had a good relationship, and then when you needed them most, they were gone. They were not there, and they come back in your life with all these excuses, like, dude, I'm sorry. I
should have been there.
Should have been there. I shouldn't have said all that. Forgive me. And most of us are like, yeah, okay, cool, but then we never connect that back up. So we're talking about that on Sunday. I'm just going to take it on into Sunday. So that allowed us, where we couldn't make this podcast up last week, it opened the door for us to step in there and open this podcast up for this week.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, the sermon. Is that right?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, talking about
Ruth. It was really good sermon series too. It was 3, yeah.
Yeah.
What was last week?
Judah and Tamar was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So we did Ruth, Judah and Tamar,
yeah.
And then this week we were talking about David.
All right, so we're on Ruth.
Woo!
Got it. All right, so that was a good sermon too. Talking about Ruth went through some hard days and how God repackaged that. Talk to me.
Well, the whole point of the regifting series is to look at life, the reality of life, and going, you're not going to make it from birth to death with a clean slate.
It's
impossible. So some people are able to go through their early years and make all their mistakes and then have 60 years of just pure clean living, man. Most of us is somewhere in between. You kind of live in blocks, like 10, 15 years of good, clean living, and there was that fence post moment that you really just kind of messed everything up. And then 10, 15 more years of good, clean living. The point is when we look back at life, how can God take those moments that have defined us, that are not great moments, and regift them? How can He take our mess-ups, our hang-ups, our hurts, things that we've done or been done to us, and regift that to change the future for His glory and for us too? How can we go, okay, at age 25, I'm just throwing my life, I'm all done, cash me out. Cash me outside, how about that? Or whatever, and not give up. And that's where grace comes in, and grace says, look, you made a mistake. We don't want you to have to pay for it your whole life. It may not look exactly like what you thought, but there's hope. And so I think if we didn't have that kind of hope in Christ, then what would be the point? What would be the point? You would run as hard as you could till you screwed up, and then when you screwed up, you just kind of sit back, coast, and just go, well, there's no hope for me. Yeah. You know, I'll always be second tier. I'll always be on the JV squad. I'll always be on the injured reserve or whatever. But God goes, no, we're going to rehab you and get you back in the game, and you're going to have some of your best games after the injury.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like for an injury or when this bad stuff happens, it usually happens like when things are going good. Like, yeah, Ruth, she's married, she's with a family, she's got a sister-in-law, brother-in-law, father-in-law, a mother-in-law. They're all together, they're all living, and then just tragedy hits, and it just messes you up.
You look at the story of Ruth, it's not real long, so if you're a biblical scholar, you probably know the story. If you don't, you may not. I mean, if you're young in the faith, or maybe been in the faith for a long time, you're just not over there in those early books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, just slides right in there. And you may not read it. There's two people in there that you really got to know, Ruth and Boaz, and then you've also got to remember Naomi. Mm-hmm. And so Naomi and her husband moved to a place called Moab. They've got 2 sons with them. Life is good. The 2 sons take wives. One of those wives is Ruth. After a time of them living, so they're a family of 6 now, living life around the big table, eating dinner together, creating life, building their home, having a business. And then the husband dies, her father-in-law. And then shortly thereafter, her brother-in-law dies. And then shortly thereafter, her husband dies. So now you got these 3 women, and their life had started off really great. Naomi's in a country she's not from. She's got 2 daughter-in-laws now from a country she's not from. And it looks like the sky's falling in. And if we were being pastors to Naomi and Ruth and these ladies, we would say, man, this is rough. Mm-hmm. Get them on the prayer chain. Surround them with people. It's going to be something. We're going to have to help them through it to make it, It's going to be difficult. So, as we looked at that, that was a pretty rough time. And then we go, how does God re-gift that?
Yeah. And you made a statement 3 weeks ago, that Ruth refused to let her past define her.
Yeah, so the point, when you go back, and it has been a couple of weeks since I preached this message, so I would say this: you can go to ilovemygrove.com and listen to the message in the entirety as we talk about re-gifting. But one of the things that we talk about, here was the title of the message, when we talk about re-gifting, we talk about making or can God re-gift your worst days, allowing God to take your worst days and do something great out of them. Instead of laying down in your worst days, do something great. So one of the things that we said, and you have to know this, and again, you can go listen to it, but Ruth decided, I will not let this loss, as colossal as it is, define me as a person. It will not define my future. Now what we know is Naomi changes her name. She changes her name to Bitter. She said, don't call me Naomi anymore, I'm bitter. This was overtaking her. Then she tells her 2 daughter-in-laws, go back to your father's house because I'm too old to have even more sons that you can marry. One of the daughter-in-laws goes, but Ruth says she's going to stay with her. Now she's married into the family. Ruth could have said, you know what? I'm going to go back home. Marriage didn't work out. He died. Father-in-law died. I lost my mother-in-law now, and I lost my sister-in-law. And went back and always had been Ruth, the woman whose husband died. Ruth, the woman who married a foreigner whose husband died. Whatever it could have been right there in Scripture.
Yeah.
But Ruth does something completely different. Ruth goes, this is the worst days of my life. I can go back to my comfort, which is what happens in worst days. You think about it. When you in your worst days, you circle back around and go to what's easy. Right? So I was talking about that today. Don't take the easy way out. Because that's naturally what you do. I want the pain to go away. I don't want to feel this way anymore. I don't want to have to look at this. I don't want to have to deal with this. So the natural tendency is, in my worst days, is to do the easiest thing to make everything stop. The hard thing to do is to keep moving forward, trusting Christ. And so what Ruth does is Ruth has a conversation with Naomi and says, you may be bitter, but you ain't getting rid of me. And where you go is where I'll go. Who you're going to live with, I'll live with. And your family will be my family. And this will not define me. There's hope in my future. And that's where we have to get to when we're going to allow God to re-gift our worst days, is we have to go give time to grief. Obviously, there was a grieving period. But we go, I can't let this define me. You know, God's future for me didn't end with this. You know, I mean, I've had some worse days. I've had some really worse days.
And when you look at the story as a whole, you see what God did in her life because she had that faith that God could do something through that. I mean, it's just incredible to see that. To look at the story as a whole and think, if you go through a bad day, if you go through a bad tragedy in your life, you lose somebody, lose a loved one, that God can restore that and take that and potentially do something even greater.
You know, and I know. Since let's talk about death first, because that's what Ruth went through. You and I both know people who have experienced death in their family, and it radically reshapes their future in a negative way. Right? They lose a dad. They lose a spouse, they lose somebody, and the wheels come off, son. I mean, this is going to, what's wrong with them? Their dad died. What's wrong with them? Their wife died. What's wrong with them? Turn into alcoholic, turn into somebody just with no inhibition, a rebel, whatever. Their reason for living is gone, right? Because their worst days now have defined them.
It changed their whole outlook completely.
So, and if you pressed on them, you say, "What's wrong with you?" And they go, "You don't understand how I feel. You don't." And it's true. I don't. You know, I don't get it. But God does, and God goes, "Wait a minute. You went through a death. There don't have to be two of them."
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you don't like it and you don't understand it, and you're going to ask God all these questions when you get to heaven, because that's what we always say. If He's this, He said, "I got a lot of questions for Him." You won't have questions when you get there. You'll just know.
Yeah.
But maybe He goes, "I didn't intend it to destroy you. I'm actually using it to sharpen you in a lot of ways." Well, you didn't have to do it that way. I know. But in this particular case, you did. And for whatever reason, we don't know why God allowed Ruth's husband to die. But what we do know is it put her on the straight and narrow to get her back to Bethlehem, to where her life really takes off. And in fact, because her husband dies, she ends up back in Bethlehem. She ends up marrying a guy by the name of Boaz, gives birth to a son. And now she's in the lineage of David, in the lineage of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So she doesn't go through tragedy. She never makes it to the manger.
And she just holds on to that faith. And it's cool. I mean, you look at the story, you got the two women, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got her and her sister-in-law. And Naomi tells them to go back home. The sister-in-law, "I'm out. I'm gone." But Ruth is like, "No, I'm in it. I'm married into this. I'm trusting in God. I'm trusting you. Let's go. Let's do this." And she just, like you said, just God repackages her and uses her for great things.
You know, as I studied her, there's no doubt that there were years for her where it's painful.
Oh, yeah,
she missed her husband. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We sit on this side and go, "Man, she was in the lineage of Christ."
Yeah.
She didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
She died not knowing that. She didn't know that who she giving birth to is going to give birth to this and that and whatever, and here comes Jesse and David and goes on and on and on. She doesn't know that. She doesn't die at the manger. Yeah. She just dies. So her legacy outlives her. And now her legacy is connected back to her long after her life is over, but it was only because she was willing to get up, go, and trust. If she doesn't have that get up, go, and trust, we're not even talking about Ruth. Mm-hmm. We don't even have a book about Ruth. The only reason she's here, the only reason we have this conversation is because she got up and went.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I'm trying to say is, listen, nobody's saying you can't grieve. Nobody's saying you can't be hurt. Nobody's saying it's not painful. Nobody's saying get over it. Nobody's saying that. But what we are saying is okay, give yourself time in your worst days to grieve whatever that thing is you got left. Somebody died, you got fired, you were criticized, you made a mistake, you had sin in your life. Give yourself time to be embarrassed, feel guilty, confess, convicted, hurt, pain. Give yourself time, but don't let it go linger forever. Draw that to a close and go, I got to get up and I got to move forward into my future.
Well, that's what you see in Ruth's life, you know. She finds
so she didn't let it define her.
Let's go.
Yeah.
You also said she refuses to let her pain change her character.
Well, here's what we know is Ruth decided that her faith in what might be is greater than her pain in what was. Mm-hmm. So she got this pain in what was, but her faith in what might be outweighs that pain. Right? Her faith is sizably stronger than our pain. The only way, and I would argue this, the only way to overcome pain in your life is to push it out with faith. You have to come down to a point to where you're dual personality. I hurt, that's not fair, I'm struggling, I miss, all this. But God has a plan. God, I just know He's going to do something. I just know He's going to bring a blessing. He's going to open a door for a job. He's going to bring a new relationship into my life. You got to have faith in that. And you know, man, I'm not a name it, claim it guy. You know I'm not. I'm a realist. I'm an optimist. But there's sometimes in your life, it's like C.J. Mahaney said, you got to stop listening to yourself and start talking to yourself. Because if I listen to myself, man, I feel sorry for myself. Everybody's against me. But when I talk to myself, I'm a coach. I'm an encourager. Get up. Let's go. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with speaking truth in your life. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what? All things work together for the good of those who love God. I love God, and this is going to be good because He's going to work it all together. I know that.
Yeah.
But didn't you just go through that? Yeah. Well, how can you keep going? Because I know God's going to make something good out of this. Well, you can't know that. Yes, I can. Romans 8:28 says that if I love Him, and I do, He's going to make all, A-L-L, all, everything. It don't matter what you've been through, what you did, what was done to you, all of that. God takes all of that and lets it be good.
Yeah.
Works it out. So that kind of faith has to outweigh the pain. Now, there's a moment that pain is going to outweigh your faith. And that's the days that you sit on the couch and go, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I'll never make it back. I'll never have a future. I'll never be able to do this again. I'll never love again. I'll never do whatever.
It's really easy to get in that spot, too, when there's tragedy hits or you lose a loved one.
Or every day.
Yeah, yeah. Especially days like this when it's freezing and you know,
or like when we eat lunch and then we go, I'll never do that again.
Yeah, right. Until the next day.
Yeah,
we go out again.
Yep, tonight.
But we get in those places where we feel sorry for ourselves because of something that's happened in our life, and if we don't watch it, if we're not careful, we can let that just overcome us. And that's why you see so many people that are depressed and struggling with things. You know,
it's so easy to stay there.
Yeah,
it's incredible. It is. I would argue too. It's easier to stay there than to move forward. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to suck it up. This is what my lot is, and this is where I'm going to be, and I'm just going to make the most of what I got. I mean, I'm going to go get me a job, and I'm just going to work a job. Do you enjoy it? No, but it pays bills. How's your marriage? How's your marriage? Is it good? That's not great, but we're married. By George, we made commitment. That's what we're going to do. We're going to be committed. I mean, what is that? Now, truthfully, that's the easy place to be. Don't rock the boat. It's scary to say, I want more. It's scary to say, yeah, this job pays the bills, but it ain't going to be my job forever. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'm going to do something. Well, when are you going to do it today? Or how are you going to do it? I'm going to go looking for it. I'm going to go ask God to open the door. That's scary. My marriage isn't what it should be. I want it to be more, and I'm going to demand that it be more. How are you going to do that? I'm going to start working with my wife. Well, what's she going to say? I don't know. But I know this, that God intended for more.
Yeah.
So I got to work on it. And so it's very difficult. So that kind of faith, and what happens is as you go through the pain, the more faith that you have like that, the pain begins to, it never goes away. You're going to have pain in your life.
You're going to go through stuff too. Like when you are trying to get better, something's going to remind you of something, or you're going to get a setback or whatever. You're going to be back in it for a second, but you got to keep.
Think about it. I don't know if you've ever been injured playing a sport.
Yeah.
You know, something maybe that you watch or whatever. I
tore a tendon in my foot.
Yeah, so you tore a tendon. I tore my ACL when I was in college.
Doing cheerleading?
No, I did not tear it. Doing cheerleading.
He was a cheerleader in college. I played college basketball and cheerleader. I'm with you. Injury in sports.
You know, I can still murder you and be saved.
This is true.
All right, so, no, I tore my ACL playing football in college on the intramural squad because I was playing cheerleader. So my knee was injured. It was hurt. So now, from that point forward, I had surgery, another ligament put in there, so on and so forth. If I'm playing and doing stuff now, I don't go out there and think, I'm going to hurt my knee. But every now and then, I'll turn the wrong way, or if it's colder or whatever, I go, man, my knee kind of sore. But it never fully hurts like it did before.
Yeah.
It doesn't, not that kind of pain. It's a different kind. It's an ache every now and it comes and goes. Sometimes it doesn't hurt. Sometimes it does. I never consciously think my knee's gonna hurt. Why? Because I went through the surgery. They worked on it to make it better. I rehabbed it, and now I'm living life. One day the pain wasn't there, and I go every now and then. There's a twinge. There's a tweak. There's a step the wrong way, and I remember. Oh yeah, it's where I was hurt.
Yeah.
Right? That's what pain in life's like. It's not that it ever goes away. It's still there. You just learn to grow through it and grow in it. Your faith grows in that. You know God's healed you. But every now and then, something happens.
Mm-hmm.
You hear a song. You smell a smell. You hear a voice. You have a dream. You see a face, whatever, and boom, pain comes back. It's not like it was, but it's still there. And I think people have to understand that. You have to understand. I think it's an irresponsible and an unreasonable expectation to live a pain-free life.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's more responsible and reasonable to say, I'm going to live a life with less pain, and I'm going to do that by putting more faith in, or having more faith in there, as opposed to pain. But there's times that pain creeps up.
Yeah, especially if you can never try to just act like it never happened. You know what I mean? Just forget it and then say, I'm moving forward. That never happened. You got to own it and realize that happened in your life, and you went through a time where you were in pain, sorrowful, feeling sorry for yourself, and then growing that faith on top of that, knowing that it's still there and owning it and saying, this happened in my life, whether it's a sin that you've dealt with, a sin that you're struggling with, or a death, whatever it is. And owning that and saying, this happened in my life. This is a part of my story now. Now let's build on top of this.
Yeah, I think you're never going to be able to tell your story absent that.
Yeah. It's a part of you.
It's part of me.
Yeah.
My story. I've got great parts of my story. I've got very shameful and hurtful parts of my story. And then I've got more great parts to my story. Well, nobody ever just pulls up a chair, when they're getting to know Phillip, and they just go, tell me just merely about the past 5 years. I mean, if we did, that's fine. Because I can tell you about exponential growth. I can tell you about taking a little church in the middle of nowhere and watching God add hundreds and hundreds of people to it. I can talk to you about salvations. We got 7 baptisms coming up this week, just this week alone, because of what you've been doing. Maybe more than that. Had 3 last week. Got people going to the ministry. That's fine. That's not my whole story.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is when we have to talk about the whole story, that's when it gets painful. And I'm going, God, man, it's not my best days, my worst days. And God goes, here's what helps. From a sin perspective, if it's sin, God chooses not to remember it. So even when I'm talking about stuff that's not even on God's radar anymore. So I'm good with that.
Yeah.
It may be on your radar, it's not on His, right? And if we are believers, it really shouldn't be on our radar either. So when you come in, you go, here's some of my worst moments, and you're sharing those with me. We're years and years separated from whatever that was. I mean, It would be absolutely irresponsible for me to punish you for how you acted in college now.
Yeah.
Right? You're not the same guy that now. You probably done some stuff that you're like, I'm not going to tell you. And that's fine. Sometimes Christians want to use that against you. Mm-hmm. So there was a time that you blah, 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 whatever. Well, you're disqualified. You're no good. And you're like, wait a minute. I was young. I was dumb. I was whatever. So you have to understand that. And when you're dealing with that, your worst days don't define me. You may define me by them. But God doesn't, and I don't define myself by them. So we're going to keep moving. Yeah. Now, if it's not a sin problem, then it's hurt problems. And in those situations, they still don't define you. Right? Mm-hmm. Because it would be absolutely ridiculous if I said, oh, yeah, you're Tyler Brown. Didn't your parents get a divorce? That's a true statement. Mm-hmm. How long ago was that? Years?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be crazy if you said that to me? If you said, aren't you Phillip Martin? Didn't your parents get a divorce when you were young? Yeah. And did it just absolutely destroy your life? So when you take those moments and you try to define somebody by the past, it's really kind of it's ridiculous for us to do that. It is part of my story. That's part of your story. But they don't define us now. And I think that when we start looking at life that way, we have to understand, guys, listen to me. This is the thing about the cross, this thing about Christianity. And people don't agree with me. That's okay. You don't have to agree with me. That's why there's thousands of churches. Go to a pastor that you agree with. I happen to think that I'm right about this, though, is that we Christians are notorious about taking labels, sins, hurts, things, and instead of allowing, they label. Yeah. And instead of allowing God to use His grace to grow someone through that, I would rather take someone who's gone through a miraculous pain, hurt, heartache, and watch God grow. I was texting with a boy yesterday. No, today he was tweeting with me. A young man that I love very much. His mother died, left he and his younger brother. Right? When I look at him, it would be irresponsible of me to base everything that I do around that one instance. Now that has shaped this young man and made him an unbelievable guy. But I'm looking at him as a guy that goes, okay, God's growing him through that, and now he's going to be an adult that has different perspective and understanding to life through that pain. That's going to make him a better asset at age 25 than I was. Yeah. Right? But that's what we got to do. You take a guy that comes out of addiction or has colossal failure and just sin, right? And comes out of it and has gone through the rehabilitation process of life and God's work and come through. That guy is going to be even more sensitive towards things and can see things where other people can't, just because they went through that. So when you look at this, you can't let it define you. You have to let it grow you. And then you can't let your pain of what was be greater than your faith of what can be. And people have to understand, whatever you're going through, God can do much out of it. And there was 3 things I wrote about that before you go to the next question, and we'll start wrapping this thing up. But when Ruth goes to Naomi, she tells Naomi something there in the first chapter of Ruth, when Naomi's trying to get her to go home, and she goes, no, I'm not going to let this define me. And Naomi goes, just go home, I'm bitter. And Ruth goes, I'm going with you. And she says to her, she says a couple of things. She says, do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may the Lord do to me, and worse, if anything but death parts you and me. And so there's 3 keys to that kind of faith. Number 1, you got to trust God with your future. She says, where you lodge, I'll lodge. She didn't even know where she's going, but she trusts God with your future. If you're going to have faith that outweighs the pain of what was, you have to trust God with your future. When you're laying on the bathroom floor crying, going, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm ruined. I'm broken. I'm whatever. In those moments, you have got to trust Christ with your future. That's that kind of faith. Number 2 is you have to trust God with new relationships. So many times we go through these moments and we shut down. Mm-hmm. We pull back. We insulate ourselves. We hide behind walls. Now Ruth goes the opposite direction. She trusts God with her future, and she says, and Naomi, your people will be my people. I'm going to make new friendships. I'm going to have new relationships. And so we have to trust God with our relationships and give us new people to surround us. Number 3 is you have to trust God with your life. Where you die, I will die. Listen to me. Your life is not your own. You're going to scar it up, mess it up, do stuff with it, dumb stuff in life. Mm-hmm. But it's not your own, so you have to trust God with it. I mean, you get to a point where you feel like your life's ruined because they left, or you feel like your life's ruined because they died, or you feel like your life's ruined because of your sin. You have to trust God with your life, and He's going to go, I gave it to you. I'm not done with you. As long as there's breath in your lungs, you got a future. Yeah. You know, so that you got to have that kind of faith. And then the last part of that is you have to trust God in your determined loyalty. You have got to be loyal to a fault to Christ. Because she says this, and let me tell you how much I believe that. May God do worse to me than if I don't go with you and die with you. She was a determined loyalist to Christ. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to have faith that changes and radically reshapes your future and gives you greater faith in what God can do with your future than the pain of your past, you have to be determinedly loyal. And that's when you start telling yourself, I'm not accepting today as it is because God's got to do something greater than me. Yeah. Phil Martin, who do you think you are to think that God can restore you, can use you to speak to the masses? I'll tell you why. God makes all things work together for the good of those who love Him. I just believe it. You something else. The Bible says the call of God on a man's life is irrevocable. Who are you? Who am I? See, those are the kind of things you got to start telling yourself. when I start saying those things out loud, dude, my future looks bright.
Yeah, let's go. I'm ready to roll.
Let's go. So you got to have that kind of faith.
Yeah.
You know?
You took my last statement, but I'll say this. You can't tell the story of Ruth and Naomi without talking about their husbands dying. You know?
Can't.
But it starts there. It doesn't end there.
Right, yeah.
Right? And then God just shows up. They're, like you just said, they're loyal. She's loyal to Christ. She's ready to roll. She says, I'm with you. I'm not backing down. And she just trusts God's going to give her a future. And that was my last statement. You have to believe God can give you a future. And that's what she did. And like you said, she didn't know it, but she does now. Man, what a life she lived, you know?
Yeah, man. I mean, look, her life did not end the way she envisioned it when it began.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you get married. She thinks, oh, this is my husband forever. Got a family. We're eating on the table. And then, boom, tragedy hits. It's like,
everybody dies.
What in the world? And then just, she stays loyal. She says, I'm in. I'm with God. Let's go. And look what God did.
I mean, look at a guy like Job.
Yeah.
I mean, his life ends better than it began, but during the pain, he thought he'd never recover what he lost. And when you look at that, you go, my goodness, life is so different, man.
It is.
You gotta have faith. All right, what else you got on me?
That's good, man. That's about it.
Is that about it?
Yeah.
Just remember, Christ is doing a great thing, and I mentioned this one thing, and I want to leave us with this. When we start talking about not letting it define you, having faith in the future more than the pain of what was, one of the ways that Ruth saw that future was she believed God would give to me. She believed. Right? So the story of Ruth and Boaz, it finishes with a wedding and a birth. But she took a risk because Boaz is laying in the threshing floor, or on the threshing floor. Naomi sends her down there and says, look, he's the only guy that can redeem you, And she goes down there and sleeps by his feet all night. So part of what my story about God redeeming your worst is you have to believe he can do it. Mm-hmm. You have to believe it. I was talking to a gentleman not too long ago, and he said, I feel like I've made you mad. And I said, you have. You have. It angers me. I'm not mad at you. I'm angry at the situation because you don't believe. I'm believing more than you believe. And I ain't even you. You know what I mean? And so I think sometimes we give away our future because we just don't believe it. Just don't believe it. And so we have to believe. And that belief, it has a couple of different looks to it. But you have to humble yourself. If you're going to believe, you have to humble yourself. Yeah. Humility, belief starts in humility. Meaning I can't do it for myself. God can, though. And so I humble myself. And then you have to go to God. Ruth went to where Boaz was. She didn't stay at home and go, well, if it's meant to be, he'll come up here and get me. No. She believed it to be. And because she believed it, she went.
She went after it.
So many times our belief stops in kitchen table. Yeah, I believe it. What are you going to do about it? I'm going to wait till God shows up. God going, that's not belief. You want me to convince you. I mean, even Jesus said, look here, even when signs were happening, all y'all want to do is worship the signs and not the person giving the signs. So sometimes God's going, I'm not coming to you, come to me. I'm right here. I haven't moved. You got to believe and you got to come. So you humble yourself, go after it. You have to be willing to wait on the Lord too. So you believe, you humble yourself, you go to where Christ is, but then you have to be willing to wait. So many times people give up on their belief of what God can do in their worst days by not waiting. I want to force something. I want to make something happen. Lose a relationship. I want to force another one, right? So he leaves me, so I'm going to find somebody else to make much of me instead of waiting on God to work in your life. And so you got to be willing to wait, and then you got to have to give our passages and ask Him to do something with it, and then you have to walk in obedience. If you're going to see God make much of your worst days, you have to walk in obedience. And when you walk in that obedience, you can't put a timetable on it. Right? Have you ever figured out a timetable to put on whether God's going to show up or not?
No.
I mean, you've heard the whole cliche, most people give up right before they see success.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not catching on because we keep doing it. It's a great cliche, though. But one of the things that people want to do is oftentimes they want to put God on a timetable that's an unrealistic timetable. And when you think about God's timing is completely different than ours. God ultimately redeems Ruth's worst days years down the road, right? But when he redeems them, it has an eternal impact. So he redeemed her days once, forever. Mm-hmm. She thought he had redeemed her days by giving her a husband. She thought, man, I made it. God's redeemed them. And God goes, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we are expecting God to move in a time frame that's not realistic. So now I'm mad. Now I'm frustrated. I've been praying for 2 weeks, 6 months, a year. Yeah, okay. That's like that for God. You're laboring through it. We're talking about, you got this little thing. We're always talking about dieting, right? Just because we eat so much. We lose 5 pounds, we gain 7. We lose 8, we gain 9. We're always fluctuating back and forth because of the way we work and eat. So we're talking about doing that military diet. I don't know if anybody else out there is doing it, but we're going to do that military diet.
Started today right after lunch.
Did we start today? Mm-hmm. We're going to do that in the morning?
No, I thought we were doing next week.
Do I get pie?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we get pie, no cake.
That's what's wrong with our diet. So here's what's going to happen. You want to lose 5 pounds, I want to lose 5 pounds, whatever. Neither one of us are in terrible shape. It just makes us feel better, like we've done something right.
Yeah.
It's a military diet that's 3 days long. I guarantee you, 12 hours into that thing, we're going to be going, how much longer? When do I get to eat? I don't want to pay the price. I don't want to do that long. I don't want to starve that long. Here's the cool part. We know, and we've already done the research, what they're saying is if you can do it for 3 days, you lose 10 pounds. Mm-hmm. I get double what I'm wanting to lose if I can just live for 3 days on this thing. In our spiritual journey, if we could just last, we'll get double what we've been praying for. And so sometimes, guys, listen to me. You got to get to the point to where you have to push through the pain, have faith that God's going to do some great things in your life. Even though it goes longer than you think, longer than you want, God is in the restoring business. People may give up on you. You may think the future give up on you. You may have even given up on yourself. But what I'm telling you is as long as you're walking and living and breathing and you're experiencing life, Jesus Christ has not given up on you. And he can do more with your worst days than you can on your best days. And so you have to trust him in your future. So that's what I believe. And God knows I've got a whole plethora of worst days. And God's redeeming them. And I'm letting him. And I've got hurtful days. God's redeeming those. I've got great days. And God's using them. But the truth of the matter is I'm only 38 years into this thing. I got a long way to go. It'd be sad to think. He got off to a good start. At age 35, it all stopped. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So we keep moving. And the same's true for you. And so we're going to trust God to do great things. And if you haven't heard anybody say that to you lately, maybe they just haven't thought to tell you. Maybe they haven't experienced it. Or maybe, too, they're experiencing their worst days. But I believe that God can do something great through you. So be encouraged today. Be encouraged with God's word. Be encouraged by Ruth. Be encouraged by what God's allowing you to walk through. If your pain has neutralized you and you're not using it, if your sin has stopped you and you're not coming through it and growing, what a waste in your pain. You went all the way through that, experienced all that pain for nothing. You went all the way through that and had that encounter in sin and you not learned a thing from it. What a waste. Or you can go, yeah, I went through this and this and this, and this is what I've learned, this is how I've grown, and God's using it. What a blessing.
Mm-hmm. It's a good word.
It's a good word, man. Join us this Sunday, 9:30, 11 o'clock on ilovemygrove.com for a live feed as I will continue with the Regifter series as we talk about Mephibosheth and burned bridges. Listen to the sermon from this past Sunday as we talked about Shimei and burned bridges. I believe it's really pertinent. You liked it and said, let's carry it over to the next Sunday. I'm going to talk about those people when you went through some hard times where God was working in your life and you were dealing with it, but there was a burned bridge. When they disappeared and all of a sudden they show back up, how do you handle them? How does God mend that relationship? An eternity, a life is too long to allow a relationship that was so good to be broken forever over something. I believe God can mend your burned bridges. And then we're going to get into the Christmas spirit and start our Christmas sermons the following Sunday. And then we're going to come back in January, and by popular demand, meaning the staff, as we talked about this past week, we're going to do a series on hell, what it's like. The moment that you die, if hell's real, some people don't believe it's real. We're going to see what Scripture says about it. The moment you die without Christ, what do you experience in hell? We're going to talk about it.